In the wake of their 1966 US tour, which ended in late August, the Beatles maintained a relatively low public profile, a situation that caused growing concern for their manager, Brian Epstein, fearing a decline in the band's popularity, especially with the rise of the Monkees, a new American television and recording group inspired by the Beatles. Epstein, under pressure from EMI, approached George Martin in January 1967 to produce a new single for the band. Martin informed him that the band had already recorded 2 tracks, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, both of which he considered to be among their finest songs. The promotional film for Penny Lane, alongside the video for Strawberry Fields Forever, became one of the pioneering examples of the modern music video format. Directed by Swedish filmmaker Peter Goldman and produced by Tony Bramwell for Epstein's Suba Films company, the films featured a mix of surreal visuals and poignant storytelling. While footage of Liverpool was incorporated into the Penny Lane video, the scenes featuring the band were actually shot in the streets around Angel Lane in Stratford, East London. These included sequences of the band riding horses, filmed on February 5th. Other scenes, such as John Lennon walking alone on King's Road in Chelsea, were more reflective, as described by music historian Robert Rodriguez, who noted Lennon's contemplative appearance. A week before, filming had taken place at Knoll Park in Sevenoaks, where the Strawberry Fields Forever video was shot. On February 7th, more scenes were filmed, featuring the Beatles in matching red tunics, riding horses and eventually sitting down at an elegantly set table in the park. This scene was marked by an iconic moment where John Lennon, in a burst of spontaneity, overturned the table, scattering its contents, an act that, according to music critic Chris Ingham, felt like another iconoclastic gesture. The films avoided any typical performance footage, a creative decision that expanded on the innovative promotional techniques the Beatles had introduced in 1966 with their paperback Writer and Rain videos. Journalist Joe Cushley described the Penny Lane film as Lewis Carroll Goes to Liverpool, capturing its whimsical, dreamlike quality. The Beatles' visionary ideas extended beyond just music to include how their work was visually represented. As Paul McCartney predicted, "In the future, all records will have vision as well as sound," a concept that would come to life in the form of music videos in the decades to follow. According to the liner notes from the Beatles' OnePlus video collection, 2015, the filming of Penny Lane took place in East London, shortly after the band had finished overdubbing A Day in the Life. Peter Goldman, a Swedish TV director, was introduced to the band by their mutual friend Klaus Voormann. Goldman later recalled how everything happened so quickly that he only realized the significance of the project once he was already on the plane to London. The production was complicated by the musicians' union's ban on any miming during filming. Nevertheless, the resulting videos were so innovative that they could easily be mistaken for modern-day music videos, especially when compared to those that would be broadcast on MTV 15 years later. After filming in East London, the crew and the Beatles traveled to Knoll Park for additional shots, capturing the band riding horses in a countryside setting. Just like the Strawberry Fields Forever video, these scenes were filled with surreal imagery. Meanwhile, Goldman and his crew traveled to Liverpool to shoot additional sequences of the locations mentioned in Penny Lane, such as the famous barbershop and bus stop. The editing was completed swiftly, and the first known broadcast of the Penny Lane film occurred on February 11, 1967, on the BBC's Jukebox Jury. The full video was later aired on Top of the Pops on February 15th, and shortly after on the Hollywood Palace. On February 7th, the same evening that filming for Penny Lane concluded, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees visited Paul McCartney's house in London. Recording for Penny Lane started just before New Year's Eve and wrapped up nearly 3 weeks later. When it was released on February 17, 1967, it had been 196 days since the Beatles' last single, Yellow Submarine and Eleanor Rigby, the longest gap between single releases in their career up to that point. The production of Penny Lane was both groundbreaking and unconventional, with scenes shot across different locations, combining reality and imaginative visuals. The final result not only marked an evolution in the promotional film genre but also showcased the Beatles' ability to push the boundaries of creativity, setting a precedent for future generations of musicians and filmmakers alike. Peter Goldman, the quietly spoken Swedish director who worked with the Beatles for a week in London and the countryside of Sevenoaks had a unique perspective on the band. He expressed that the Beatles had transformed pop music into something much more meaningful. He said, "The Beatles have turned pop music into real music." Paul and I discussed how what began as a musical form for the youth has now expanded to encompass everyone. Youth is not just about age, it's a state of mind. Music and fashion that once belonged to the younger generation are now embraced by anyone who can think young. Once British television realizes the far-reaching appeal of bands like the Beatles, they will treat pop music with the respect it truly deserves. Peter, at 31, embodied a youthful spirit in both attitude and appearance, often dressing in a Carnaby Street-inspired green velvet frock coat with a yellow polka dot tie and a sharp black cap, looking much younger than his years. His enthusiasm for British beat music was reflected in his imaginative TV presentations of groups like the Hollies, Small Faces and the Trogs. His early introduction to Klaus Voormann, the bassist of Manfred Mann, led to his collaboration with Brian Epstein. It was through Voormann that Peter's work was brought to Epstein's attention, resulting in a quick invitation for Peter to fly to England. Peter's passion for presenting British groups on television was initially sparked by Dick Lester's iconic A Hard Day's Night film, which he considered an exceptional piece of work. Inspired by it, he wanted to bring that same energy to the small screen and showcase the Beatles and other bands in a fresh and original way. However, Peter was also concerned about the expectations placed upon him. He had recently filmed the Beatles' Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane clips, which were shown on top of the pops in black and white, even though they were shot in color. Peter worried that the intricate lighting effects he used wouldn't come through properly in monochrome, though he was still thrilled to have worked with the Beatles on such a significant project. Recalling his first meeting with the band, Peter shared a warm memory of meeting Ringo at his home. Ringo kindly took him on a walk through his garden with his wife Maureen and their poodle Tiger. Peter recalled getting his boots muddy, and Ringo, ever the gentleman, insisted on replacing them with a new pair. Despite numerous mishaps during the filming, such as the horses in the Penny Lane scene bolting when the Beatles dismounted and the need to spend hours retrieving them, the Beatles remained patient and understanding. Likewise, during the Strawberry Fields shoot, the crew's tree piano setup was destroyed by a gust of wind, requiring them to start over. Yet, despite these setbacks, Peter's admiration for the band only grew. One surprising discovery for Peter was the British law preventing the Beatles from miming to their track, which he found unnecessary. To compensate, he had to come up with creative filming locations and ideas that were in harmony with the songs, avoiding making the Beatles appear like actors in a comedy. Peter also found Ringo to be very knowledgeable about camera and photography techniques, while Paul proved to be an engaging conversationalist. The Beatles made it clear, however, that Peter was the director, and they trusted him to lead the project. Despite the typical challenges of British weather, such as fog and poor lighting, Peter's time filming with the Beatles was a rewarding experience. His respect for them grew not only because of their extraordinary musical talents, but also due to their personal qualities. Peter remarked that the Beatles were incredibly gifted and praised their forthcoming album, which he believed would surprise many listeners. He described it as very different from what people might expect and extremely good.